I want to talk to you about a sticking point that is self-evident and self-referential, and those are always the most difficult sticking points. An example of this would be heaven. If you believe in heaven, the idea of a perfect place that lasts forever, and you describe heaven as 1,000 angels plucking harps or whatever it is that you describe heaven as, by definition, you want to be in heaven, right? And heaven is X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z is by definition perfect. And perfect is better than imperfect. And so you can go round and round in this referential or self-referential loop. Just you describe heaven, right? And then do you want to be in heaven or not, right? And it just goes round and round. So it's a trap, right? Anything that catches energy in an endless loop is a trap. And cults tend to be built on self-referential loops, right? You believe in Jesus, okay? And Jesus said that this is the way, okay? And the way is that this is the best way. And the best way is to believe in Jesus, right? And so, okay, right? The one God, the only God, the right God, the best God, the highest God, and God says you must believe in God and only in me, right? Well, you've got a loop there. And cults do this all the time with anything. And in our cult, right, in our culture, rationality is up at the pinnacle of the cult. The rational brain, right? That's way up here, right? Every cult has its value hierarchy, and there's always a top value up at the top, and being rational is way up there. You can be irrational if you're cute, sexy, and fun, and it's tolerated. But if you're unattractive, then you're crazy, right? So, and that's not even worth dealing with. So you've got rationality or crazy down at the bottom. And what rationality is you take the entirety of reality and then you cut it into bits called words, and you string those bits together using a word called language, right? And you make a mental map in your mind. We make a mental map in our mind that attempts to capture the more relevant aspects of reality to our well-being. We have no words for most of what reality is, but we don't notice that because we generally have words for the things that affect us the most. So our language is culture-centric, egocentric, species-centric. So we have a lot of words that relate to Earth and our engagement with matter, etc. And because we identify as being capitalists, right? We're in the worship and pursuit of capital. Then we have lots of words that reference money and all the different things relating to money. but we create a map, right, with words that attempt to somewhat crudely help us relate to reality. And I say crudely because if we use language in the traditional sense, I'll say, that's a purple iris right there. But that's not reality, right? Purple iris is a very crude description of, first of all, there are over 1,000 varieties of iris. Secondly, each iris is different. Thirdly, there's more than 1,000 shades of purple in just that iris. But we don't want to waste our time going into such granular detail. Is it the bearded iris? This, that? Is it, where did it come from? What's its state? That's reality. And reality is really, really, really big. It's immensely complex. And so, digitally, we get into a language of, 4,000 pixels per, I think it's square inch. Whatever it is, it's 4,000 pixels, right? And we say that, 4,000 pixels. But reality is going into each of those pixels and saying, 0012, 003, and even that's not reality, right? Reality is getting a microscope and going to that iris and looking at all that variation. And even that isn't reality. Reality is always bigger. Reality is going to the subatomic level, where there's more activity in a single second than our brain can process in an entire lifetime. That's reality. And so what language is a very crude overlay. It's a map, right? And it's good enough, right? It's good enough. Like for conversation purposes, we can say, I'm going to the Philippines. There it is on the map. But of course, that isn't the Philippines. And that's a very big place. And I may not actually end up there. I might get sick on the way and be rushed to hospital. I might change my mind. So these are all just maps, very, very crude maps. And yet, some maps are relatively safe or useful in the sense that they somewhat crudely predict the future, right? If we have a map of the word sun, and we have this idea of this flaming ball that goes around the earth, and that every day there will be, a certain number of hours of sunlight. Of course, the word sun and the word light is not the sun, and it isn't light. But that map comforts us, right? The idea that there is a sun, and that's it, and this is light, and it's coming and going. It's very pleasing compared to the chaos and the terror of the unknown. And so we get attached to our map of reality, our thoughts, and we believe our thoughts. Because when we believe thoughts that allow us to predict the future with some degree of accuracy, we have the illusion of being in control. Right? We have the illusion. Now, we're not actually in control. What I mean is the sun could go supernova at any given point. There could be solar flares that, do this and that. There could be a variety of things, right? An asteroid could hit the planet and we're not around for the next sun, opening up of the sun. Had dinosaurs had a map of reality that said every day the sun does this and that, and then the next day they were all dead, and bigger asteroids could have come that, shook the earth up, even into fragments. It's not, the map does not control reality. Rather, the map has a statistical probability field of accuracy that gives us an illusion, a feeling of being in control of all the things that we're not actually in control of. And that feeling of control and that anticipation allows us to sync up with parts of reality more gracefully, right? If you see a car racing towards you and you move out of the way because you have a map that cars cause damage if they hit you, you're not in control of the car and all that, but you can have a more graceful relationship with the car by having that map and anticipating and stepping outside of the way. And so, particularly in our cult, rational thought and the illusion of control that it provides is such a high deity that it has been, in many ways, it has eclipsed any awareness that there is a reality that our map has represented. Right? Many of us read a book and think that we're dealing with reality when we're dealing with little characters that are not real, that relate to sounds that are not real, that are organized into words that are not real, that are assembled in our mind to make sentences that are not real, that create images that are not reality, that we use to predict the future that is only probable based on a very tiny little thing that we're focusing on, right? Which isn't reality either, right? Reality is much bigger than that. But it's comforting to think that our thoughts are real and that believing our thoughts are real. And it's in a cult that worships thought, in a cult that elevates thought to the highest deity, then it's easy to become part of the self-referential trap of thoughts. When you can accurately predict certain key events at a statistically high rate, let's say 95%, if you can predict the stock market, which isn't real, that allows you to make money that isn't real, right? They're just digits moving around. If you can do that and everyone is bowing to you because you've got a good predictive model of reality that allows you to make money, which is perhaps the highest deity in a capitalist cult, it is remarkable what people will do for money that they would not do for love, for example, because we're not a loveist cult, we're a capitalist cult, right? And so if you say to someone, if you eat a spider, I will love you more. Who needs that? If you say to a person, if you eat a spider, I'll give you $1,000. Suddenly, you get takers, right? And it's bizarre, but nonetheless, right? We believe our thoughts, and we confuse our thoughts with reality. And this is the trap, right? Thoughts are the most elevated thing. This is what I think. Rationality is the most elevated thing. This is the rational thought. If this is the case, and this is a case, then this must be the case, says the rational mind, right? And you look for correlating data, right? Supporting data, and you say, yep, that's the way it is. That is the way it is, right? Now, this leads to conflict, of course, because there have been 10,000 cults in human history, each with their own language, each with their own belief system, each with their own value hierarchy. Everyone, by the way, has the same values. Right? Everyone values survival, everyone values security, everyone values pleasure, everyone values nourishment, everyone values fear, everyone values pain, everyone values the same thing, but in a different sequence, in a different hierarchy. Some people, freedom is up at the top, right? Some people, not being bossed around is up at the top. For most people, not re-experiencing their worst traumas is up at the top. I never want to feel that way again, whatever that is. And so I'm going to do everything possible to not feel that way again, right? And that's their highest value. That's their greatest deity. They're praying to not experience that again, right? And that's their frame of reference, right? Would that, if I did this and this, like if I get close to you, maybe I would feel the way I felt when I got close to that other person. And my number one goal is never to feel that way again. So we have this model of reality, this map, and it's very much like a Google map. A Google map is not a mountain, nor does the Google map tell you how many grasshoppers are on the mountain, nor does it tell you what color the mountain is, or whether you're going through turquoise green or forest green. The Google map tells you almost nothing. The only thing that it tells you is the general direction that you're going in relation to the mountain. It's about it. So the Google map is not a mountain. It is a map that helps you relate to the mountain. And it is a map that is containing less than a millionth of the relevant data, less than a trillionth, right? If you look at all the data that's on a single slice of Google Map, it's 1 trillion times bigger. The number of sand particles, the number of iron particles, the number of ants, the number of butterflies, the decay state of this leaf, none of it's on the map. And that's a good metaphor to understand that our thoughts, which are our mental map that we overlay on reality, are also 1 trillionth of the actual reality. That we either don't know that we don't know, or we're just not paying attention to because our mind has a limited bandwidth, right? So, rationality is the highest value. This is the most rational thing, right? Rationality is a good thing. People are rewarding you. That's very rational. You don't want to be irrational. You go round and round and round. And because everyone's mental map is different, because people create a mental map that references their memories, and everyone has experienced different things. So people emphasize different things, right? Someone who has been raped emphasizes quiet alleys in a different way that someone who has never been raped doesn't emphasize that, right? When a party is dissipating and there's only one person left, someone who's been raped looks at that as a threat. Someone who hasn't been raped might look at this as a great opportunity to get more intimate, to get more, involved. And so not only is the reality, different, but we emphasize it and we see it through different lenses that are very personal. And so no one will ever have the exact same mental map as another human being. Now, this becomes problematic when we confuse our mental map of reality with reality. Like, we believe that our mental map is real, i.e., we think it's reality. And it isn't. It's a curated, crude, incomplete model of parts of reality. And other people have crude, incomplete models of part of reality, and they're referencing and emphasizing different things. And what is right for us is wrong for someone else, right? It is right for someone who never wants to be raped again and has that as their highest deity, right? That thought, I never want to be raped again, that's my number one goal in life. That's their highest deity. It is right for that person to stay more in public places and crowds and not spend time alone and do this. It is right for them because that's consistent with their God, with their goddess, their deity, right? That's what they're worshiping, is not having that. And less rapes take place in public places, right? Now, if you're wanting to get out of the noise and, oh my gosh, why do we have to always meet in this crowded, horrible places, right? It's just so noisy. I'm sensitive to that. It is right for you to be annoyed, and it is right for you to want to be alone in a park or go for a hike or something and get out of these public places. That is right for you. But it is not right for them. Right? It's right for you, and it's not right for them. Now, if you understand that every single person has a different mental map of reality, and that no map is real, and that the map isn't real, and that they're all incomplete, well, it starts to, well, it's a step better than believing that your map is real, and that if everyone agreed to see things the way you did and do things the way that is obvious, perfect. I mean, it's the most rational thing to do if people are looking at your map, right? If people are looking, see, because people have the different hierarchy of values. Your value is to get out of the noise and not be overstimulated, right? Because you're a sensitive. And their value is not to be raped, and the noise is a minor inconvenience to pursue that, right? Different values at different sequence. You also don't want to be raped. You're just not dwelling on that. And so the risk of rape is marginalized, right? But the risk of being overwhelmed and not being able to hear them and getting a headache, that's huge because you feel that all the time, right? And your goal is, I'm sick of this bullshit, crowded stuff, right? I'm sick of it, right? No more of that, right? That is the wrong way to have a relationship. This is the right way for me, right? For us. And so that's really the key distinction. And the trap that we can get into, right, is a circular loop where our model means this, where we create a model of reality, and this is right for us, right? So we've got to only meet people in quiet places because we're sick of the noise. And then, right, we got to filter out all the people that are insisting on meeting in crowded, noisy bars, right? Just get rid of them, right? It's just they've got it all wrong, right? So then we have to do that. And so we have to make up a story. And most of us are insecure enough in our map. We've experienced enough anomalies where our reality didn't go the way we thought it should and would. Right? That's called anomalous data. Our map of reality is that people should like us and will like us if we do this and this because we would like someone who did this and this. And so we're going to do that. And it didn't work. They hated us. Right? What's going on here? The map says they should like us. And we did exactly the things that should be what they like. But they hated us. What's going on, right? Now, all this anomalous data is very destabilizing because it reminds us of the truth that our map is not reality, our map is incomplete, our map is flawed, and our map is not reality. It's a slice, and a very skewed slice, of reality. But one of the things that insecure and simpler people do, right? It's very tempting. I do it all the time, is villainize, demonize the people with different maps. Why do they insist on these noises? They're just dumb, right? They're too dumb, right? They if they're scared of me, they can't tell the difference between a safe person and uncertain. That's dumb, right? I'm a very safe person. They're just dumb, right? So, and then their bias is wrong, right? They can't live their whole lives doing this and that because of this. That's wrong, right? So the easiest thing to do when we encounter another map of reality is to just say that it's obviously wrong, right? Because our map is real. We're dealing with reality, and their map is wrong. And so we get caught in a loop, right? We're right. which means that every other person on earth is wrong. Or sometimes we have an idol and they disagree with us, and then we say, well, we're wrong, right? Sometimes we flip it, right? So, the Dalai Lama, the spiritual, and he said this, but it doesn't fit for me at all. I tried doing what he said, but I must be wrong. Right? My map is wrong. His map is reality, right? So sometimes we deify a person, a role model, and we actually give up our map of reality that correlates with our experience, and we subjugate it to someone that we're honoring or respecting above ourselves, right? And so sometimes it goes that way. But most of the time, we know that we're right, and the simplest thing is that everyone else is wrong. Now, if you really don't understand why this is a simplistic way of thinking, here's a good little exercise. Imagine that this is the globe here, right? And you're up here, right? You're up here near the North Pole, and you're talking with somebody down here. You've got good satellite signal. Maybe you've got a Starlink subscription. So you're up there talking with someone down here, right? Or maybe, let's say you're talking with someone over here, right? And you're talking and you say, how the weather, right? And you say, oh, I'm freezing up here. I say, freezing? What are you talking about? It's hot. It's hot, right? They're in Brazil. You're in the North Pole. It's freezing. No, it's hot. What? Look around. It's cold. It's icy. There's 6 feet of snow. Oh, you look around. It's beaches, hot sun, whatever. Something's off. They're obviously not paying attention, but you go on to, other topics and you say, well, what time of day is it? Well, it's, high noon. What? It's midnight. It's midnight. What are we talking about? High noon, right? And they've got the time wrong, right? And then you say, are there any fruits and vegetables growing around you? Fruits and vegetables is 6 feet of snow, right? And we're all standing in a different position with reality, which is much bigger than just Earth, right? But you can understand that if you don't grasp the fact that reality is different, that it's summer here when it's winter here, that it's night here when it's day here, that it's hot here when it's cold there, that if you're standing in different positions and you're in communication, what you're generating is depth perception, right? If you can expand your map of reality to understand that while it's cold here, it's hot over here, then what the other person says expands your world. But most of us are fools. We're up here at the North Pole, and we don't believe it when somebody says it's 90 degrees. We don't believe it when they say they're swimming. We don't believe it when they says it's nice out. We don't believe them when they say it's noon. We don't believe them when they say they're eating avocados. We just, they're nuts, right? And so our world doesn't expand. We push people out of our life that speak of parts of reality that we don't see because we're not in that position. And we don't learn about it. We diminish and we keep the reality very small at a level that we can process. And this makes us feel comfortable, right? Because it's very uncomfortable to say that the world is 1,000 times, 1 trillion times bigger than I can possibly compute. And, it means I'm not in control. But what I really want to, talk about is the self-referential loops that we get into with our models of reality. Every time I go dating, it doesn't go well. I hate it. Okay? Right? So every time I go dating, it does not go well. I hate it when it doesn't go well. Every time it doesn't go well. I hate it when it doesn't go well. Well, what's the obvious rational conclusion? Well, one is no more dates, right? I'm finished, right? I'm just finished with dating, right? And now, problem solved, right? It's problem solved. Did you have a terrible date? No, I didn't have any date. Right? It's wonderful, right? And so our rationality can see us in loops, right? Where mom and dad said, listen to what we say, right? Or you're a bad child. I don't want to be a bad child, so I should listen to what mom and dad says. Mom and dad says this. It doesn't feel right, but I don't want to be a bad child, so I should listen to it, right? So you just get into one of these loops. Now, the thing to understand is that the thinker, like here's a thought, the thinker of the thought, by definition, is bigger than the thought. Right? So you have the thought, the thinker or creator of the thought, by definition, is bigger than one thought. Because the thinker has many thoughts, right? The thinker has, a thought here, a thought there, a thought there, a thought there, a thought there. So by definition, the thinker is bigger than any one thought. Right? So that's important to understand. But here's the real difficult, dynamic. Now, the one who believes the thoughts must be different, bigger than the one who thinks the thought, right? So there's the thought, there's the one who thinks the thought, and then there's the one who believes the thought. That's right. I believe that thought. I believe in that thought. Must be bigger because that's outside of the one who's thinking, right? There's the one that's watching and deciding, do I believe or not? Do I invest? Is that me, right? So that must be bigger than the thought, right? Because it's outside of the thought and it's choosing to believe the thought, right? So the believer is bigger than the thinker, right? But when the believer believes the thought 100%, it becomes the same size as the thought. It identifies with the thought, right? So the believer starts out bigger when it doesn't believe, right? It's just watching, right? But when the believer believes the thought 100%, it enters the thought. The I, the ego, enters the thought and attaches itself to the thought. It's now synonymous with the thought's boundaries. Now, this is the most dangerous territory in human history because this is the reason people go to war, right? So you have the thought, you have the thinker of the thought, you have the believer of the thought, or the disbeliever. And when the believer believes the thought 100%, identifies with it, then the believer and the thought become one, right? Through attachment. Now, once I am defined by the thought, this is how identification happens, right? You have the I, and then the identification is the attachment with a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Once the identification happens, the attachment to the pattern, to the thought, now the ego and the thought believe they are one. It's an enmeshment, a blending of thought and ego. Once that happens, then any data that threatens this thought is a threat to the I, is a threat to the identity, the pattern that the I defines itself as. So if I say, God is God, and someone says, no, God isn't God, he's Yahweh. And then someone else says, no, it's not Yahweh, it's Francisco. No, it's Garuda, it's Singha, it's Manwe, right? It's Mani Padma Om, it's this, it's that, right? It's Ganesh. It's not this, it's Ganesh, right? Well, if you are the thought, if you are the shape through belief, these are all threats to your existence. How can you exist if you believe that this is it? Then I become one with the belief, I become one with the thought that I believe in, right? So a believer is someone who is enmeshed with the thought and has contracted themselves into the thought. Now, this is the most vulnerable state that a human can be in, because first of all, thoughts are incredibly fragile. Secondly, they're not real. Thirdly, nobody agrees to it. Fourth, they're all transient. If we look at the history of humanity over time, we see that 95% of all cults, of all cultures, are extinct. They're dead. Their languages are dead. Their beliefs are dead. Their gods are dead. Their whole cult is dead, right? Nobody even speaks their language anymore. And of the last 500 cults that remain on Earth, they are going extinct faster than new cults are being formed. So if you are a cult, you have a cult identity. If you are a culture, this is me, this is my culture, and you're going extinct, and you're going to go extinct, then engaging with people who are different is a terrifying experience, particularly when they come in large numbers. Foreigners, right, coming in large numbers, disrupting the way of life, my cult, my beliefs, my values. It's incredibly fragile to believe a thought, right? Because we then identify, we attach to the thought, and from that moment forth, all the tens of millions of thoughts that are floating around, they're all threats to our identity, to our pattern of existence, to our reality. So you have people willing to physically die to protect their thought, that they believe, that they have faith in the thought, right? Even though the data is showing thoughts are the most fragile things imaginable, clinging to the thought. So this is the state, in many ways, of adolescence. As we emerge into rationality, we go from the child of copying and everything that was given and identifying. Maybe we go through adolescence and develop our own thoughts, our own patterns of thinking, and elevate rationality and rational thought. This is kind of we now define ourselves by our thought. I think these thoughts are real. We're now in a very fragile place, because no matter what we think, the thought is smaller than reality. The thought is a map that is smaller than reality. And what that means is that there's anomalous data, right? And so a good way of looking, at reality is the sphere. And a good way of looking at your thought pattern is as, a grid, as an infrastructure, as a shape that is superimposed on reality. And if you've got a really good, well-balanced thought map, it looks something like this, right? Because it covers most of reality. It's got a little complexity to it. It's a resilient, symmetrical shape. But it isn't reality. Reality exists outside of the shape in the form of anomalous data, contraindications, things that have happened or are happening that do not fit within the confines of our beliefs, of our thoughts. Now, if we believe we are the thought, these things are a threat to our existence. And so we must attack, deny, suppress anomalous data. Get rid of them, right? Got to do it, because it's a threat to who we are, right? And this is the terrified sociopathic ego, right? That is identified, it's attached to a little narrow thought. It's constantly trying to feel safe by being around other people that agree with it. It ignores and fights any data that's counter to its reality. And so, there it is. Now, The thing that most of us don't realize, meaning we don't make it real, is that by definition, the witnesser, the one who witnesses, the one who has the thought, is bigger than the thought, right? And is more resilient than the thought. Now, if data comes along that proves that this thought is inaccurate, and we are the thought and we believe the thought wholeheartedly, then our whole beliefs are broken, our identity is broken, our ego feels threatened with death. It is a traumatic event to be enmeshed with a belief and have it broken with data, which always happens, right? By the way, that is a guaranteed occurrence over the next trillion years. Whatever we think today over the next trillion years is absolutely guaranteed to be broken, to not withstand the test of time and data. That is the nature of a crude map in relation to a vast reality. It has nothing to do with, you being a good or bad person. That is the nature of reality. But the witness is not broken, right? Because when one thought is disproved, there's a void. And then the witness says, well, what about this? And what about that, right? Well, that's not true, but what about this, right? So the witness is not broken when the thought is broken or when the belief is broken by anomalous data. That means the witness is bigger than the thought or the ego that believes the thought, the believer. The witness is bigger than the believer, right? So you have the thought, you have the believer, and both of those can and will die. But the witness, the one who witnesses the thought and the believer, remains, right? And this is the exit from the self-referential loop of idealizing rational thought. And it is also the only way to find peace and freedom, because as soon as you are attached to a thought that is not supported by anomalous data, and there is always anomalous data, right? You're a radical materialist, there's always these irritating past life experiences, the near death. There's always something, this prediction, always some irritating thing that can't be explained with materialism, and you got to attack it, right? You got to defend it, right? If you're a spiritualist and you talk about this, there's always these crappy things, your prediction didn't happen. There's always stuff that didn't work, right? If you believe in Waldorf education, right? We've got to have a Waldorf education. Then you start looking at, but this Waldorf teacher pathologically abused this kid. Didn't they get training? Why should there be Waldorf? And then why are we learning this when this is the new skill set, right? So there's anomalous data that challenges the structure, that challenges the thought. We should all be Christians because Christians have killed more people in war than any other group in the last 1,000 years, even though the commandment says don't kill. And good Christians, wait a minute. You're saying we should be Christians and pray to God that we will win the war, and God said don't kill. It's nuts. How do you hold that together? Right? You don't, right? The schizophrenia, hypocrisy, whatever it is that you're clinging to so desperately, eventually must be let go of because it is not supported by the anomalous data that is at the edge. No matter how dominant the paradigm is, there's an edge, there's a margin. And the truth, the full truth, includes its opposite, right? So if you say you should be Christian, you shouldn't be Christian, you're getting somewhere, right? Because you've got anomalous data that supports both statements. Both statements are too simple. You should be Christian, you shouldn't be Christian. Well, between those two, you can probably create a few trillion truths that is resilient to data. If you embrace paradox within your map, right? I should eat sugar, I shouldn't eat sugar. I should be nice, I should be cruel, right? That's the problem with, Snow White, right? She couldn't be cruel to the witch, right? So she went to sleep, right? So you have to be nice, you have to be cruel. You have to be cruel so that you can be nice, right? If you invite thieves into your house, you can't be nice to your children because they steal all your things, right? You have to be cruel to be kind. You have to be kind to be cruel, right? So if you can say that every opposite is true, and you can hold that, now you're getting somewhere, because there's no anomalous data that exists outside of the entire spectrum of opposites. It's just we can't make sense of that, right? How can we, what do we do? What do we do? Tell me what to do, says the insecure ego, right? Well, there is a witness, there is a presence, there is a one, there is a self that exists outside of the I that has identified with a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, right? And we are not an adult, we are not wise, we have not transcended the limited sense of fear and war. As long as we identify with a series of thoughts that we are attached to, we will be at war with ourselves, the other parts of us that try and point out stuff. Like if we believe we're in stoicism, right? Well, there's a part of us that's saying, come on, do we have to be stoic all the time? You're so tough on me all the time. There's a part of us that says that to our inner stoic. And the inner stoic has to say, shut up, this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. Right? But the witness can say, well, there could be a place for both. You could be stoic half of the year and relax and do something nice the other time, right? The witness is outside of the set of the belief. And so the witness is bigger than the ego and is eternal relative to the ego. Meaning, as long as there are human beings witnessing anything, the witness will be present. 1 trillion years from now, if there's a human being witnessing the cult of 1 trillion years from now, the witness will still be here. But all the beliefs of today will have perished millions of years earlier, right? If we look at what survived in the last 30,000 years, like how much you and I believe that was believed 30,000 years ago, it's nothing. And time has sped up. So in 1,000 years from now, there will be more happening in terms of human thought evolution than has happened in the last 30,000 years. More. It's happening faster, right? And so everything that we think of today will be a joke in a few thousand years. And as that change happens, the ego attached to the thought and to believing it is going to be threatened, is going to be traumatized. You mean that isn't the ultimate physics, right? How upsetting for Einstein, who came up with classic physics, etc., to then discover subatomic particles don't follow those laws. Well, how upsetting will it be when the subatomic particle physicists discover that there's a different reality at some macro or micro scale, right? That we haven't begun to explore yet. How upset will they be, right? The more you believe, the more you are shattered. Your identity is shattered when your beliefs are shown to be inadequate representations of the complexity of a paradoxical reality, right? So the movement is towards the witness, which the ego and the adolescent stage of development doesn't want to let go. It finally developed its thoughts. This is the right thought instead of that one, and this is the only way to look at it, and this is the good scientist. Those are all idiots over there. This is the right way. Those are all idiots over there. It's finally got it, right? And now the ego wants to go on a campaign to change the entire world to its model of reality. The only trouble is there are literally billions of egos that want to do the exact same thing and change the entire world to its model of reality. There is only one part of the psyche that is bigger than the I and the thought and the thinker, and that is the witness. That is the presence that is beyond words, that witnesses each word coming into being but is beyond words. That is the eternal. That is the transcendent. That is the self. That is the wise one. This one comes, this one goes. Right? But life is still here. Reality is still here. This comes, this goes. Reality is still here. Now, this transition beyond thought, beyond belief, is a tricky one, and it comes after belief. It's awakening up that we're bigger than the belief. It comes after belief. It doesn't come before. Right? We need to go through the ego developmental cycle of determining and choosing our beliefs and identifying with them, and then waking up to a part that is beyond. Now, in my experience, this happens confusingly, slowly, sometimes not at all, but somewhere around 40s, 45 to 55, somewhere in that range, if someone's going to wake up and be aware of that. Now, before it was the solidness of rational thought, the power of the predictive models, the preciseness, the level of articulation, the level of integrity of the identity, of the I pattern, the I identity. Now it's about moving beyond that identity into grace, into transcendent states, into presence. Presence is the new language. Witness, presence, and it's about the peace and resonance, the quality of that presence, which holds opposites, which is not attached to any one side, that witnesses, that has space for lots of different realities, but understands that it is bigger, that it transcends the lineal, rational mind that is resting on the foundation of language. And it understands that the whole, the synergy of what is, that reality is bigger than the maps that describe it. And so you move towards the Zen master that laughs, right? Right? That laughs and has no thought, that has no word, right? Because what's there is a presence, what's there is a peace on the other side of language, right? And the adolescent wants to go back into the structure, and this means this, and this means this. So it must mean this, and believe and become a believer, but, right? The Zen monk, right? That is aware of the oneness of all things, sees each thought, each belief in its paradoxical as a ripple, right? As a dot on the ocean, and has room for all of it without believing any of it, without confusing the map of reality for reality. It's fun to think about and not take too seriously, because all of these are thoughts. And the witness is the one that witnesses it all and lets go. The witness is the one that witnesses it all and transcends all thought.